Hey, it's Kevin DeWitt here. Welcome back to the Mixing in a Home Music Studio course. In this video, we're going to talk about software basics. So firstly, if you are new to my channel and new to my videos and you like what you see, click the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to be notified of all my future videos. So, software basics. I'm assuming that you've got yourself some mixing software, recording software, whatever you want to call it, DAW, whatever else, and you've got something there, you're ready to go. Now, in this course, as I said, I'm using Cubase Pro. Hopefully what I teach here is going to translate enough, but I will be showing you some basics and concepts and all that sort of stuff about how to use the software. Using Cubase Pro, you will have to translate it to your software if you're using something different, but most of the mixing software, DAWs, are all very similar, right? They're all slightly different. They all do things a little bit differently. Some more than others, are more different than others, but the general concepts are usually there. The general ideas and all that sort of stuff can be translated and it can be found, because they all basically want everybody to use them, so they don't want to be too different a lot of the times unless they are specifically something entirely different. So, hopefully what I show here in Cubase Pro will translate pretty well to your software and you'll be able to work out what that is in your software. So we're going to cover things off like, just from the basics of installations and license files and all that sort of stuff to projects and, how do you operate with things in the mix window and doing some editing and all of those so basic functions. Okay, so, we need to understand that because you're going to get into mixing, you need to know how to use the software. Now, I'm not going to teach you everything about the software, okay? I'm not here to claim to teach Cubase Pro, right? That's not the point of this. The point of this is to teach you some basic stuff about using your software in general and things like that. I don't want to be teaching, the entire software package as such, right? So hopefully we'll cover enough of that you can get through it, but if you want to learn more about your software and how to do more advanced things and everything else, then you will need to look at tutorials on that software or open the manual up, whatever. Okay, so let's get into it because it's going to be easier for me to show you on a screen than it is to just you stare at my head all day talking. So let's get into it and I'll show you a few things. All right, so we open up Cubase and basically to start a new project, it will most likely default to this Steinberg hub thing here. But if it doesn't and it goes into here, you can obviously go up to the file menu and go new project. So we get many options here and you can pick some predefined templates across the top, mastering, production, scoring, recording. Obviously you can go for your recent, which will give you your history, and you can go into the more tab. The more tab is where it will show you templates that you have created and saved yourself. So when you create your own templates, that's where they will appear in more. And we just pick whatever we want to create as a template and we can go create. Now, if we didn't have one selected, or we can select empty, we can then just go create. You can see it'll either be set for prompt for project location, or you can use the default location that is here, which you generally have predefined when you set up your software for the first time. And once you've done that, you'll come into the window here and it will have whatever you have set up, so whatever project you opened or created, whether it was blank or a template, it will load up the appropriate tracks that is being configured in that template and be ready for you to start recording. It will generally come up with a default name, so the first thing I always like to do is do a save as for my project so that I am ready to go with its location and the save file basically established. So our project basically is our song, as I've already said, and it includes all of the necessary things you need to do. Record, it'll have all of your tracks, buses, whatever you want to create in there. You can add any tracks you like, and just keep saving it and keep recording and over again, and you'll end up with a hopefully very good song. Okay, so our project settings, I've gone through a little bit of this already in the previous video, but again, just to repeat that, just so you're 100% sure. Once you've created your new project, you can go up to your project menu here and go to project setup. You'll have various options in here. You can obviously put your name and company and all that sort of stuff. But the main items here is really going to be your sample rate. So select the appropriate sample rate for your song, select the appropriate bit depth for your song, and the file type. I always leave it as a WAV file. But you can pick any one of these if you so choose. Click OK, and you are locked in, ready to go. Now, there's many other settings you can, configure in your program, but that's obviously the main element there. We want to make sure that we have that right first off, so that every file we record will be already in that format of the correct sample rate and bit depth that we choose. Now, if this is a new install of your software, one thing to keep in mind is that there is some settings that need to be applied for your audio interface. So the first thing you need to do, and these may stay the same once you've done it once. Okay, so I don't think it's per project setup, but let's just run through it anyway, just in case. But it's a good idea to check before you start recording in your project to make sure it is all set up right. So assuming you've already installed your audio interface into your system and your operating system and all the software is installed, you're going to go up to Studio in Cubase Pro, go to Studio Setup. Now, if you go down to VST Audio System, you'll most likely see a drop down here. Now, if I show you a drop down here, you'll see I've got a few options. You want to find your audio interface, in my case, Universal Audio Apollo Firewire version, and you're going to click on it, and it may say switch. So we're going to switch over to there, and then there's some other settings here, which I'm not really going to go into, but you can start off with just default settings. And basically you install that, you click OK, and your audio interface has been configured to be the primary thing for your Cubase project or your Cubase software. Now, if we go back in here, we can then see if we click on the actual bit just below it, where the interface is now, we get a few other options. Now, we get a control panel. Now, if I was to click on that, it will open up my actual audio interface software control panel. So in this case, it's opened up my UAD, where I can change some settings like the buffer size and a few other little things that you can do on that interface. But all of them are going to be different, so depending on what yours is, that's what it's going to come up. But what we're going to see here is also our inputs and outputs. All right, so at the top on mine, I've got my ins, and down here in the blue, I've got my outputs. Now, it's going to set them up in some sort of default manner. So you can just leave it as is if it looks okay, or you can adjust it. Right, so we've got, and the amount that you see here is going to depend on your audio interface, right? I've got quite a lot of inputs on my audio interface. It is a big interface, so there's a lot of options there. But let's just run through the ins, right? So just basically, as I said, the first channel here shows you whether it's in or out. Then it has a port system name, and that cannot be changed in here, right? That is locked. It is just what it is called, but it gives you a hint at what it is actually doing and what its purpose is. Now, you may need to cross-reference your actual console or whatever you've got in your software for your audio interface to see what's happening, because I can give mine names in here as well. But you also might want to come in here, okay, and go, all right, that's in input 1, and you can go here and you could rename that. So you might want to say vocal mic, right? And you can name it, enter it. And you can do that for all the interfaces. So if you had another one, that could be something else. Or in my case here, that might be, you know, the camper, whatever. Just set that to whatever you like. And then the last two channels here, one is it shows whether it's active, and depending on your audio interface, that will depend on whether it thinks there's something plugged in, whether it's live, whatever else. And the other one is visible. So for instance, in my case here, I have a lot of inputs. And if I say, well, I'm never going to use any of these ADAT inputs, oops, I could untick these so that when I go to use the software, they're not visible. They don't, you know, mess up my interface and show inputs that I just never want to access. At the moment, I just leave them all on, but that's just me. I know which ones I want to access and everything else. Now, I'll show you where they get set in a moment, but let's just run through this. And then our other section, obviously, as I said, outs. So we've got our outs, and it'll detail all of the outputs that your audio interface has. And again, the numbers will vary depending on your audio interface. You may have as many as I do. You may only have 1 and 2. So in my case here, monitor left and monitor right, they're basically my main outputs for my speakers. And again, I can rename those to something that I prefer if I choose. It shows that they are active, and again, I could hide it if I want to. I'm not going to for obvious reasons, but I could hide some of these outputs if I don't want them to be visible. And once you've got all that set up, just click OK. I'm going to click cancel because I don't want to do anything with it. Once you've got all that set up in your studio setup, the other place to go is the audio connections. And if we look in the audio connection section here, this is where you can really customize it. And this is why I didn't really name the other inputs, okay? And it's mainly because you can name them all here as well. And you can actually save presets. So if you have different setups, like I have here, where I use a different interface or something like that. If you have multiple audio interfaces and you want to switch, you can save presets once you set them up. So in regards to here in our imports, we basically set up a bus and we can connect that to our audio interface and our port of choice. Okay, so if I wanted to add a new bus, I can click on add a bus. It comes up, it asks, you know, how many ports do I want to add? Are they mono or stereo? And I can give them a name, right? And let's just, I'm going to give it a name of test, and I want it to be, we'll go stereo. Right, I'm going to add it. Okay, so you'll see here it's created a new interface down here as test. Once it's done that, it just automatically defines the next available input, but you might want to come across here and pick your audio interface. Obviously I could pick not connected if I want to disconnect this for any reason, or if it has come up as not connected, just come in here, select the audio interface, and it's only going to give you the option of the one that's been selected in the studio setup, and then you get all your ports. Now you can see all of those inputs here, right? So these are all the inputs that we had before. So you know how I said that if you don't want to see this giant list and you never use certain ports, you can hide them, make them not visible, so they just won't appear. And then you can pick which one you want. Now it's automatically picked these two because I've already got most of them set up. So in my case here, I have mic 1, it's set up as a mono track, and it's set for the audio interface, and I set it to that very first port. Then I have a DI that's also mono, and it's set up to be the second input on my Apollo. Then I have a stereo one, which is called a Beat Buddy, but it's actually not that anymore. And it's set up for tracks 5 and 6, and then I've got this camper one which is set up for lines 3 and 4, and synth drums etc. set up for 7 and 8, and then there's this one here that we added for test, which I can also now come in here and go remove, so if I want to delete it. So we set all of those up, And then we can come across and do the same thing for our outputs. So again, we can have as many outputs buses as we like. We can add a new one and whatever else. You may just have one because you may only want to have one audio interface. So in regards to this, say these are my studio monitors. I've called it Focal monitors because it's the brand they are. I made it stereo, obviously left and right, and then I can add it to the audio interface and it'll pick which next available outputs are. And I can obviously change them to the main outputs if I wanted to. And you can create more. So if you've got multiple outputs on your audio interface, this is where you do it. You can set up headphone, and you know, in my case, I've got a reamp port. Now in Cubase Pro, we also have a feature called Control Room, and that's why these show as not connected. And the reason they show as not connected is because the Control Room is actually doing it. Now that's a little bit above what I'm showing here, but I'll just give you a brief. If you turn on Control Room, which is this section over here, which I'll show you there, this is where you can set all that up. So if you're setting it all up in Control Room, then you don't set outputs. You set your inputs, but you don't set outputs. You set these. And you'll see here that, again, instead of called a bus, now it's called a channel. Again, I can save presets. And in this one here, again, we have a channel that's called Focal monitors, and that is set up for the main left and right. So they're the very first outputs on my UAD Apollo. And then I've got another set of speakers doing something else, and another set of speakers again doing something else. And then I've got mixing headphones, recording headphones, which is not connected, but I could connect it. And they actually appear on this control room at the bottom here. So I could switch between various speakers, as you'll see up here. So I could flick between speakers for testing purposes if I choose to. Okay, but that's a little bit, as I said, above and beyond. So if you don't set up control room, just set up your outputs. And then once you've got those done, I know this sounds a bit over the top, but that's what I'm saying. A lot of the time it's a one-off setup. Then once you're in and you create your tracks, say this bass amp one, now we can set our inputs. And these are the inputs that we just defined in the audio connections. Right, so in my case here, my bass is going to be set to Kemper. And our outputs can be various things, all right? So I've got outputs going to a bus, but here's our true outputs up the top here, okay? So depending on whether you're routing to buses or not, that's going to change your setup. So if I actually go across to the buses, they're then going to go out to a main mix bus, but you'll see the main mix bus is set to go to my Focal monitors so that I can hear it. But that is just the output. So we can still use the control room to hear out other sources if we so choose, because this is a monitoring area. But that's where we're actually routing our output to from a sort of bounce down point of view, right? So that's how we set our outputs, and that's how we set our inputs. All right, so when we first open up Cubase, more than likely we're going to be straight away into our project window, and this is what we refer to as our project window. All right, and there's lots of things we can do in here, but you can see we've got all our tracks. Once we start recording, you're going to see audio appear on here. We can pretty much control everything we want. We can enable track recording. We can listen. We can go into the E channel where we can play with some equalizers, load inserts, anything you want. We can do pretty much from this window, right? You don't need to go to any window else that you don't want to. Right, we can access stuff on the side here. Mix meters and control room and media and plugins, whatever you want, you can get there. And this is where we're going to do all our editing and recording. You can see down the bottom here, we have transport controls and all that great stuff. We can sort by folder, put things in folders. We can mute, solo, anything there. But you can also see on the side here, if we actually select a track, we then have all of this functionality here. Now, these things can also be hidden if we don't want to see them. So we can up here hide certain windows. So we could say get rid of that very left one, or have that in. We could get rid of the right one if we don't want to. And we can even show another one down the bottom, which can then show our sort of mix window. So this is where if you want to actually do everything in the one window and never switch to a mix window, you can open this one up here and you can switch between various things. You can also, show a toolbar. You can expand it or shrink it, whatever else. But then you can also switch across to some audio editors, a sampler, chord pads, and various other things in this bottom little tab here. Now, even on the side here, we can switch across to various things like a track, an editor. We can do visibility. So if we wanted to, let's get rid of that. If I wanted to hide like all of these tracks and just show this buses group, I can do that. Or I can put them all back in and show everything again. Now, when we have a track selected, you'll see if we're in the inspector, we also have all of these controls over here. So again, we've got our mutes and, monitors. We've also got a volume. We've got some panning controls. Here's our inputs and outputs. And we can expand all these other items like track versions, chords, inserts. Here's our plugins. We can go to our channel strip. That's the embedded Cubase one. We've got our embedded equalizer. Again, Cubase one. We can show our sends, direct routing, and here's our fader. So now we can do our mixing if we wanted to from this fader. We can even have a notepad and some sort of quick controls. Right, so this is what I'm saying. If you prefer to work in one window, you can do everything from this project window. This is really the main control for the entire program. You've got all your editing tools up here and lots of functions that is impossible for me to teach right now, because it would take a long time to teach an entire course on Cubase, and that's not the point of this video. All right, so alternatively, here is our mix window. Now, I opened that up by pressing a hotkey F3, but you can also go across to Studio here and you can open the mix console. You can actually open up 3 versions of the mix console if you so choose and have them customized individually. But I generally just work in one. And you can see here, again, we've got the same sort of level of customization, but this one here now is more designed around mixing, okay? We lose a bit of functionality because we don't have access to the audio files for editing and things like that. But again, we can show lots of things here. We've got our visibility again, as I said, so we could hide tracks if we don't want to see them or paste them back in. We can go across to history, we can do snapshots, right? Lots of stuff there, but we can also hide that if we don't want to see it at all. Show it again. Over here, we've got our control room or meters. Again, we could hide that if we want, or show it again. So there's many options we can do here. We've got we've got all our tracks here and buses and everything appearing here. We can then use this to mix. There's our volume faders. We've got our pan controls. We can mute, solo, listen. We can even open up our channel settings. We can do automation. We can monitor, record, enable. We can color code, rename, whatever we want to do. Okay, you can actually change the view as well and what is shown on here. So you can add in a channel view up the top, an overview, You can get rid of this meter bridge, which is sort of like a set of meters. You can get rid of that. And, now it's showing our routing, whatever else. You can show your equalizer right on here if you so choose to. You can hide or show the channel racks, which is these ones here. So let's say we get rid of the meter bridge, and these can be expanded and shrunk as well. So we have our routing, we have our inserts where all our plugins will go. We have the EQ, which is embedded in Cubase if you want to use that. We can have our strip view, and we can shrink them all back down as well. We have our sends, so anything that we're doing sends for we can show, and we can show some direct routing there. We can put some pictures in if we so choose, and these are all customizable to a point. We can show them bigger, smaller. We can have a notepad so that we can write some things in there. We can show some channel latency. So you can customize this to show whatever you prefer to see in your mixing window. And again, you can make the faders even smaller or really big, whatever you so prefer. And you can save like templates, etc. for your views so that you can switch between views and whatever else you want. You can also go into your racks, which is this section here. If I expand that, this is our racks, but we can also turn off racks or add racks if we want to see more. So if we wanted to add some of these other racks in here, we can. So we can have our pre section there. We can have, what else did I have? Cues, if we're doing cues. Quick thing and a panel. I never use those. I don't even know what to use them for, to be honest. And because I work solo, I don't use cues either. And I don't really use the pre's too much, but they could be added there. That's fine. Whatever view you want, it's possible to do it there. So this is why I say, it's obviously called the mix console or the mix window, as I refer to it as, and this is where I would spend a lot of time while I'm mixing. Okay, so tracks is basically a key element of our song or project. It's where everything happens. So if we want to record a new instrument or something, we need to add a track. Now, you may already have tracks loaded in a template or something like that, but if you don't and you're building this from scratch, you're going to want to come in here and just add a track. Now we get lots of tracks. There's tons here. I'm not going to explain them all. Cubase Pro has lots. The main ones we're going to be looking at is really the audio and the instrument. Group ones are good. Group is also, Cubase call them groups. Some people call them buses, whatever you want to call them. They're very handy as well. And obviously folder ones are great. And even effects tracks, which you can send things to. But there's lots of stuff here which you can add, but you might want to go add an audio track. Then what you can do is you can pick some options here. So I can say, all right, what's your input? You can predefine your input. Obviously you can change this later, but you can pick the one that you want. So you can say that one there. Configuration, is it mono, is it stereo, is it 5.1, whatever you need it to be, you can set it to, say mono, and then I can pick an output. So I could send it straight out to the main output if I wanted to, or I could send it to a bus, something like that if I wanted to reroute it, and I can even put a name in. If I don't put a name, it'll just sort of default something, but I can also add multiple tracks. So if I know I'm going to be recording, 10 instruments, then they're all mono, I might want to just pick 10 now. And then what I'll come in later is just tweak the outputs and the inputs and the names, etc. to do that. Now instrument, very similar, except in this case here we're going to pick a virtual instrument to use. And again, we'll still pick our output and we just add it then, right? There's no other real options there. And again, we can do a count, so we can do multiple of those tracks. Once you do add them, they're going to appear here, and they'll appear just like something like this, for instance. And you've got all your various settings for it. This is where it's going to record the audio if you record enable it, and it's where once the audio is there, it's going to play back from. And some of the little symbols here, so you can add all these little things, these features, turn whatever on you need to do. This button here indicates the type of track. So one circle is a mono track, and do I have one that's stereo? Hang on, let's find one. There you go, and you'll see that one with the two sort of circles together. That's a stereo track, so you can see quickly what type of track it is. All right, so transport controls are essential to being able to use the software, really. And you can see in Cubase here, we have them down the bottom. We can also bring them up with the shortcut F2 in a separate window, and you can see the various settings here. We can also adjust this to show more or less features if we so choose to. Okay, some of the main controls here, we have a stop button, right? And this functions basically like think of old tape decks or VCRs or anything like that. If you've ever used those, it's all pretty simple. Stop is stop. So play just plays our song. So if we've got audio recorded on here, it would be playing. You can see our marker here. This is basically our cursor. This is where we are in the song. We can click stop again. We can jump around if we choose to move our cursor to various spots to click play from a different part of our song. If we have a track set to record enable, so let's find one we can. So let's say this BGV, we want to record a part, we record enable it. Now if we come and click here and click record, it will start recording audio. It's actually recording me talking right now into the microphone, which is great. You can see the play and record lights up, very similar again to the old style tape deck. We used to hold down the two buttons. In our case, we didn't have to hold two buttons down. You just click on record. And I can undo that to get rid of it. Now, if I have a track record enabled and I click play, it will not record, right? You have to actually click the record button to record it. Click play, it's just going to play. The other key one here is the cycle button. So if we turn on cycle, we can actually set a loop. So if I quickly set a loop, so you can see this section up here, I've got basically a start marker and an end marker. If I have this loop control on and I click play, it will play over and over again this little section here. So I can jump it forward just to get to the end. You'll see it'll get to the end and it will jump back to the start. That also applies to recording. So if I go record, I'll do it from here as an example. It will hit the end and it will jump back. So just be wary of that, because otherwise it will keep recording over itself as well. All right, so we could stop that. But if you don't want it to do that, even if you have this section defined, if I turn loop off and now I play or record, it will just continue past this section and will not loop back. Right, and even the same thing. If I had loop on and I put the cursor outside of the loop area, I can just click play and the loop area will do nothing because I'm outside of it. Right, so it's not going to loop, it's just going to keep going. Okay, so some other very useful controls that I will show you is some of the track controls. All right, so pretty much every track is going to have most of these features. Okay, so some of the key ones here is our panning. So C is for center, right? And it can vary if it's a mono track or a stereo track. We can pan it across fully to the left, fully to the right, or anywhere in between, whatever you so choose. Okay, we can double click to bring up a thing to type it in. M is for mute. So if we want to quickly, while we're playing the song, not hear this track, we can mute the track. It will go silent. All the other tracks will still play. We just will not hear this one. If we want to hear this track by itself, we can click the solo button. And what that'll do is basically mute every other track but itself. So we will only hear this track now playing back. The E button is the edit channel settings. Now I showed that. That basically hides and pulls up this window. Okay, so it gives us access to all of these extra settings. You know, channel strip, equalizer, you know, strip here. All our plugins we can add. Our sends, Q sends, whatever, it's all pretty much here in this window. Once you get into automation functions, we have two buttons here. One is read, one is write. Generally, our first step with automation is to write it. So we click on the write button, that puts us into the write mode. Now we can write automation. You'll see the read button automatically lit up because it just assumes that if you go and write automation that eventually you'll want to read it. But we can turn that off. With them both off, it will do nothing. It won't write automation and it won't read automation. Now once we've got automation written, we can then turn on the read automation and then it will actually read the automation and follow it. So if you've got volume increases happening automatically, it will follow those volume increases as defined by your automation. If you wanted to stop it reading that, so even though you've got it set and you've got volume changes happening, if you want it to ignore it for a period of time, just unclick the read button and it will stop reading the automation. It doesn't remove the automation is still there, it just does not read it and does not follow it anymore. We have our record enable button. If that is turned off, even if we click the record button on our transport bar, it will not record this track, right? You can record multiple tracks at once, or you can record one track, right? Whatever you so choose, but it's going to, when we click record on the transport button, it's going to record every track in our project that this button is turned on for. If there's no buttons turned on, it's not going to record anything. If there's one turned on, it'll record that one track. If we have record enabled 5 tracks, it'll record those 5 tracks. If we have every track in our project record enabled, it will record every track in our project. The next button is our monitor button. So if we have an instrument plugged in, an external one, and we want to hear it, we can click on the monitor and you can see now that the meter's moving. That's my microphone as I'm talking moving. And you can see that, right? And potentially you can hear it. It might sound bad right now, I don't know. So I'm going to turn it off so that it doesn't impact because there could have been an echo for a second there. But that's what you want to do if you want to hear it from the actual recording software. And our main control here is our fader, which is obviously our volume of the track. So, you know, once we get into mixing or you know, you can even do a little bit while you're recording if your track's a bit loud or you just want to balance your tracks a little bit. You can obviously move this fader so you could make your bass louder, your BGV. You could drop that down so it's not as loud as the main vocal. Whatever you want to do, you can set that there. And obviously there's a little meter here that's going to give you an idea of the loudness of your track. So in Cubase Pro, we have a listen button. This is similar to Solo, but slightly different. And when I say it's similar, it depends on how you have it configured. When you click on listen, and you can turn this on many tracks or one track. Same applies to mute and solo, I forgot to mention that. You can put mute on multiple tracks or you can put solo on multiple tracks. So then it's not so solo, but it's what you want to hear. Listen is similar by default to solo, okay? It will basically sound like it's soloing your track, but you can configure it slightly different, and that's how I do it, okay? So what I do... Okay, so the listen button, as I was saying, can be set up to a different way. Now, I'm not sure if there's another place to set it, but where I set it is in our control room over here. If I click on this main button here, it opens up a whole lot of different settings, like a talk button, and stuff like that. But you'll see here we have the listen dim. Now I have it set, in this case here, it's set to -14.6. Not exactly sure why I set it to that level, but I think I just picked a nice one. Now I think by default, I think it could be down in infinity, which means that it will dim all of the other tracks except for the one that you click listen to infinity. So it basically works as a solo. But what I did was I had it set to a level, as I said, which was -14.6. That'll do, -14.7. And what that allowed it to do was dim the audio of all the other tracks except for the one I clicked the listen button on by that much, by -14.6. So what it allows me to do is to sort of get a great combination of solo and not solo. I can hear this track a lot more present, but I can still hear it in the context of the rest of the song. So that's how I use it. So in mixing, I might want to sort of get the feel of solo, but still hear it in the mix. So still hear it in comparison to the rest of the song if I'm doing an EQ change or something like that. So that's where I use it, and that's how I use it. All right, so with our recording location, that's pretty much established at the start of creating the project. So we had a couple of options here when we were creating our project, and one was to use a default location, and you can configure that default location to be whatever you want it to be, and it will remember that for the next time. And you know, you can have a project folder underneath that, whatever you want, or you can go prompt so that when you go and actually create, it will prompt you for a location. So then you can find a space for it, you know, create a new folder, whatever you want to do. And then within that folder, so let's say that's your project folder, within that, it will by default create like an audio folder. And under there, that is where it will record all the actual raw audio. So as I've explained to you, if we were sitting here, we do not want to be running off our main C drive here. So we want to have another drive. So you might want to have a second drive, like a D drive or something like that. Or in my case, I've got a work in progress. And in here, you might have a location and create something, create a folder, and that's where you'll record for this one project. Now you can do that. Obviously you can record every project in a totally different location, and I suggest you record it in a different folder, but it could be a totally different location as well. Okay, so another essential item obviously is to set our tempo, and you can see on the bottom here we have a tempo control down here. So we can adjust that tempo, double click on it, type a new setting, whatever you want to do. We have to turn that off first. Type a new setting and you'll see it adjusted the lines there to sort of suit. You can also do it from this transport control here. So you F2 to bring it up, and again, here it is here. So you can do that. This button here activated a tempo track. So that's why I had to override it. I had to turn it off to manually change this, because otherwise what it would do is you would add a tempo track, and that way you could actually draw tempo changes. So if your song has a tempo change, you can draw them in to this tempo track, and then it will follow that instead of being hard coded to the value I put here. We can obviously change the time signature as well. All right, let's look at some basic editing functions in Cubase. So it's slightly changed now in this version. I've got version 10.5 now, and they've actually got a combined tool here. I can actually show you the old way, which is pretty easy by unticking that, but I'll show you both anyway, just so you can see what the current one does. So anything before 10 will function this way. We have an object select tool up the top here. If we are in this mode, you can see we've just got an arrow. I can pick things as I choose, and if I want to move it around, I just click on it and I move it and let go and it drops it, right? So I can do that. And that's pretty simple, right? There's special key commands you can do to change your mode. So if I wanted to duplicate this, I could hold the Alt key down while I drag, and it will instantly make a second copy. But these are sort of advanced features, okay? We mainly stick to the basics here, but there's lots of special commands you can do. And this is one of them, is just the select tool and move it around. We also have a range tool. So if we went on the range tool, we can now actually highlight a part. So now when I click, I'm not selecting this audio, I'm just picking a point, but I can also click and drag to select a section, and then I could do functions. So I could, if I had, key command to split it, I could do that to separate that track out or anything like that. Or if I move it so it becomes the hand, I can actually grab it and it will actually move that little section out. So it automatically split it and moved it. Now I can just undo to go back. Now in Cubase 10.5, we can actually click this little equal sign here and it will actually join the two tools, selection and range, together. And now what we'll do, I'll just expand this a bit. We have different locations. So if we are up the top of this waveform, you'll see the cursor changes. At the top, we're in the range selection now. If I go down lower, it becomes the arrow and we become object selection. So now I can object select, go up to the top, range tool again. Now, once I've got a range set, you'll see it automatically change to the hand. If I go down, it becomes the arrow again. Arrow just straight away goes back to that function. If I stay up the top, it becomes the hand, and then I can do that automatically split and move function. Now, the other way to copy is to obviously use some controls. We could go up to the edit and go copy, and then I'm over here and I click on paste and it copies that exact audio file over to here. Now, it doesn't copy the file on your hard drive, it just copies an instance of it. So it's actually still one audio file, but it means now it will play that audio file twice, once here and once here. So don't feel that you're using extra hard disk space when you use a copy paste function. You're not. These visual representations in here they're more a reference to your audio. So even if I was to delete or cut this, make it shorter, the original audio file is still there. It's still long and whatever else. It's just we're telling the program only to reference this part of that audio file and only play it. So just keep that in mind. We're not editing the actual audio files themselves. We're editing how our project references those audio files and uses those audio files. We can also do the copy paste function from a right click here. Right, we can right click wherever we want, paste. We can also use our standard key commands of Control C, Control V, copy paste, right? Same as anything else in Windows or whatever your commands are on a Mac, you can do that. No problem whatsoever. Now, if we want to split this audio file up, we have a scissor tool up here. So we can pick the scissor tool and we can come across here and anywhere we want, we can click and it will instantly cut it. It'll cut it, right? We can cut it in lots of spots, whatever we want. And then if we go back to our select tool, these are all separated. We can move them any way we want. We can do a shortcut to get to that. And if we are in our select tool, if I hold the Alt key down, you'll see that it is showing this scissor now. If I click, it's doing a cut, right? And as soon as I let go of the Alt key, we're back to our normal control. So that's sort of a shortcut. Instead of having to pick the tool up here, we can just be in our standard object selection tool and hold the Alt key down and click, and it will cut it. Now there's other shortcuts as well, as you'll see here. You could press buttons like, say number 3, and it will suddenly move to the split tool. So those little numbers indicating the number that you can press to shortcut straight to it. Okay, we have some fades and trim abilities straight from this view as well. So we don't have to go to any fancy tools or anything like that. But what we have is a couple of spots. So you can see up the top here, there's a little arrow in each corner. And if we do from the top, you'll see that the arrows change to a sideways. If we move that in, you can see we are now doing a fade. Right, it's just a simple straight line fade. So if you want to do advanced fades, you will have to go into the menus to find them. But just to do a simple fade, we can just drag along as short or as long as we want and do that. And we do the same on the other side there. Okay, so it's the top control there. We'll do that. If we want to actually trim the audio without splitting it, just trim the end or the start off. Go down to the bottom control and you'll see same sort of cursor, but this time we are actually shortening the waveform and shortening our audio. So if we've got a lot of dead space, we want to trim it off, we can. Same with the start. We can go to the start and trim the start off. We can also grab this little dot up the top here, and this is actually like a gain setting. So we can reduce the volume of our waveform right here in this window. It does not move the fader on our actual track. Our fader is still at 0. This is actually just the audio file's volume on here. And we can take it straight back up to 0 if we so choose. When I create songs for the first time, I like to create session templates out of them or out of it. Going forward. Now I've already got my template set up the way I like, so that's all great. So here's an example of my session template, and I suggest that you build your own. But what I suggest is once you actually do get a layout that you like, that you do save it as a session template so that your next song, you can pull up that template and you've got most of it laid out. Now, you may need to tweak it, and you'll tweak it as you go, and as you get more experienced, you'll adjust and change things. So various things here, like I like to use folders, right? So you'll see there's all folders here. They're all color coded. I use the same colors for these instruments all the time. And buses, I've got a bunch of buses that I send all my tracks to group them all together. Then I'll basically have a drum folder with all my drum tracks in here, and these will be deleted, used, whatever. They're sort of different virtual instruments. So, this is what I mean. It's a bit of a template to give me a starting point, and I may remove and delete things. I'll have bass, guitars, whatever, all laid out. On top of that, I also have these sort of markers up the top here that I can move and adjust to set the different sections of the song, so that if I wanted to jump to a section, I can quickly see on the markers where it is, and I can use shortcuts if I want to jump to it. If you have a preferred default tempo, you can change that. So like, let's say for instance, you do EDM tracks, you might have a tempo that you use pretty much all the time. So you can predefine that in your session template, so you don't have to change your tempo ever. You still can change it, obviously, if you are suddenly doing a song that's different, but Cubase defaults to 120, but you might have a different setting that you prefer to use. And I like to save this as a project as well, so that I can keep coming back and opening it as a project to adjust and tweak my template. But once I've also got my template, then you just open File and you come down to Save as Template, and you'll see here some ones that I've already got created. You can put in a name and you can give some attributes or whatever you want, and you click OK and save it. Right, and you'll see I've got ones here that I've already got saved, as I said. And that's where, once you've saved that, if you go to New Project and you go across to More, you will then see these are your templates. So you will then pick the one you want. So let's say, for instance, I want a recording template that's blank, so it has no virtual instruments. I can then click that and I can click create, and then I'll pick my folder because I've got it to prompt. And suddenly I've created a new project with all of these tracks laid out the way I want them, ready to go, ready for me to start recording. Now the trick is that when you do create this template, you want to have all of your audio files deleted. Okay, so if you are going to base it off your song that you just created, which I will show you how to do this when we get to that step, you will probably want to first save this as a another copy, or back up the project to somewhere else. Then once you've done that, I would then delete all the audio files, because you don't want audio in your template. Now you can keep it in there if you wish. So let's say, for instance, you are somebody that uses some predefined samples all the time, or you like to use some Foley samples or something like that in all your tracks. You could have them embedded in your template, and they will always be there in your template. For someone like me that's creating songs, I don't necessarily have default samples, so I don't save them as part of my templates, but you can. You could have audio files that you like to use, one-hit samples and all that sort of stuff, and keep them all in your project so that they're there every time you open it up. You can definitely do that. But otherwise, I remove all the audio so that I've got basically a clean template with no audio in it. It's just got the virtual instruments I want to use or may want to use, or just the track layout and the bus layout. Whatever you prefer your template to be is how you want to do, right? So there you go. That is some software basics. Hopefully it's been useful to you. Hopefully it can translate to whatever software you're using if you're not using Cubase Pro. But if you do have any questions or anything like that, put it in the comments. I will try to help as best I can. Can't claim to know everything about all the software, but I will attempt to research or find any guidance I can to help wherever I can. So please do feel free to put any questions in there. It doesn't have to be specific about Cubase Pro. There might be other people in the chat or the comments that can help as well that may use the same software. So if you do have anything you don't understand or you're not sure about, do put it in the comments. Or if I forgot to mention something or something was not clear, please do put it in the comments. I love to hear from everybody, and I love to help everybody progress as much as I can through this course and get the most out of it. I read all the comments, and I will answer every question, or as many of the questions as I possibly can, as quickly as I can. If you did like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to be notified of all my future videos. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.